Hey everybody, Ben here from DMT Films and Cinderblock Studios, and I am back with a digital time-lapse of a concept piece I did in Photoshop just recently. And right now I'm just laying out some basic color. I did a sketch in my sketchbook, and I decided to go into Photoshop and figure out exactly what I wanted to do with the color. So I'm picking a lot of gray tones, very earthy browns, and just kind of laying out some basic shapes right now. I'm using my custom paint brushes here. These are my palette knife set, which you can find on my DeviantArt page. And so for the time being, I just started throwing in some color. So at this point, I'm throwing in a couple of just general guidelines so I don't lose my shapes as I'm throwing in some of the more heavier details. So generally forming out the sky right now, basically did that with just a mid-tone gray and a white, and just started playing around with exactly what I wanted to do with the sky, and checking my reference there for just how I want to map out the clouds and the way they kind of meet underneath, and sort of have this underside of the cloud as the dominant section of the sky. So I'm going in and forming out the shapes of the rocks on the right, and they're going to be underneath some sections of sand, so I wanted to do those relatively early on, just adding in some minor highlights and shadows in there, just forming out the basic idea of where I want them. On the left hand side, I wanted to do something of a cliff, so I was just trying to figure out just what to do there. So again, basic highlight and shadow layer, throwing down some inner sections and some outer sections. At this point then I'll just throw a couple of lines back in. So playing around with my layers, try not to do too many of them. I don't want to get lost in them, so I'm putting these building structures in, trying to keep with perspective as much as possible. This is set up in one-point perspective, at least generally speaking. The mountains on the right tend to point down towards a second vanishing point, but I didn't actually establish that at all. So I wanted to make my city somewhat magical, so I put in these funny rune-type shapes, and just a simple darker color, and then these very specific highlights over top, and then some background glow. I think really brought that city to life. So taking in with just a couple of extra detail lines, and figuring out where these little sections of the rocks are going to be. And I grabbed a nice sort of toned down, tinted up brownish sandy color. I wanted it to be a little bit warmer than the rocks and the city itself, and really kind of bring some additional color into the piece. Sticking out of the sand, I wanted to have something, some kind of an old structure, so I decided to go with this something of a ladder. The ladder itself doesn't necessarily signify anything. It's just sort of there because I'm like, okay, this will sort of work. Have this old rusty ladder sticking up out of the sand. Maybe there was something underneath the sand and just kind of got weathered away and got pushed over top over time. So just kind of throwing in a couple of shadows. Maybe it's sticking out of a hole. I'm not really sure. But this piece is mainly about color more than anything else. So on the lower left-hand side, I definitely wanted to try to put a figure in of sorts to kind of bring up the idea of some kind of a scale, as you don't exactly know how big the buildings and the rocks are until you see like a creature or something to kind of give you an idea of that. So I made this little plateau off to the side, and threw in just a kind of a guy with this big crazy cape coming off the back. The cape I did a little bit of adjusting work on, though. I had to get the little guy on a separate layer. I played around quite a bit with getting the just the cape to kind of work the way I wanted it to. I wanted it to seem like it was flowing in the wind, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't too stiff either. And kind of got a nice arc of a shape there. So at this point I just throw in a couple extra dark lines to finish up the concept piece. This particular piece is make it into a painting, and look forward to the painting process video coming up on the channel very, very, very soon. This has been from DMC Films and Cinderblock Studios. See you guys next time.